Hi, this video is going to walk you through the basics of research. In Comp 1, we do just a little bit of it to kind of get you into the idea of how to research. But in Comp 2, we will do much more to expand upon how to do in-depth research. So I'm just going to give you some pointers and then some specific places where you can go to find sources that I think might be useful. So we're going to be working out of the Master Guide to Essay and Rhetoric, and on page 28 that starts how to research. So again, this is a much more detailed step-by-step method for a more formal research paper like you would do in Comp 2. So what I want to do is I want to skip to past most of that and look at, just point out the place here where I've shown you where to find online sources. Some of these or none of these may be helpful to your particular topic, but there are a lot of free digital libraries, and these are all credible sources. I would not have listed them here if I would not have felt like they would be sources that would give you really good information. So you can see there's quite a few. I believe I also replicate this in helpful links and info, research online databases and libraries, digital libraries with free resources. So there are also not as many, but there are some listed there as well. Okay, so again, you can read this first part. I talk about internet sources can be dangerous. Where do you find sources? But I want us to go to the CRAP test. Now, this is not mine. You see in the I gave credit to the Merriam Library at Cal State University in Chico. I just really like this. I like helpful lists that have acronyms that's easy to remember. Like my paragraph development is the MEAT method, right? So crap test is good, and it also kind of is a pun, right? Because you're wanting to distinguish the crap out there from the good stuff, right? So the C is for currency. When was this information put out, right? How recent is it? That's not always going to be an important factor. For example, in my field, I'm a specialist in ancient Greek literature or classical Greek literature. And, I'm all the time citing things that were written 3,000 years ago. I also like to write about philosophy. And so I could cite Aristotle and Plato 3,000 years ago, right? And they're still relevant. But there are other things that even if they're 5 years old, they would not be relevant. Like if you're in a tech field or medical field, 5 years may just be way, way out of date. So think about, when was it published? When was it last revised or dated? That's updated. That's important for like websites, right? So are the links functional, right? Can you find the stuff? So the R is for relevance. Does it fit your needs, right? You might find information that's about your topic, but is it really about what you need for that topic? So let me give you an example. The student essay, let me open it up. I should have had it open. The student essay is about fast food managing. And if you look at his second point, he talks about a fast food restaurant manager should be creative. Well, when we think about creativity, most of us probably our first thoughts are about artists, musicians, writers, game designers, people who use their imagination and their fancy that to create something kind of artistic, right? If we actually look up what creativity means, and we get like the dictionary, the use of imagination or original ideas, especially in the production of an artistic work, right? We might look for some more ideas. I know Webster says the act of being creative, so it's not a helpful definition, right? That definition, that's why I say you can't use Webster's or any kind of dictionary, because that's so generic. And if you use that as your definition, well, what has that got to do with restaurant management, right? What our student here does is he explains how creativity functions in the context that he has chosen, right? And so some of these definitions for creativity might really define creativity, but they wouldn't be relevant for the way he needs to use it. And so that's what the R means there in terms of relevance. You might find information, but it just doesn't fit your needs. It doesn't target the right audience, so it's not going to help you convince them, right? It might not be here at an appropriate level. So maybe something is written for, a fifth grader, but you're talking to, adults. That might be too big of a gap, or vice versa. You're talking maybe to your source is talking to experts in the field, and you're talking to people who aren't experts. That might make the information irrelevant to them because they can't understand it. That's why paraphrasing and summarizing is such an important skill, because if I have a source that the main problem in making it relevant is that it wasn't written for my audience, but the information is helpful, I can paraphrase or summarize that into my own words and then make my restatement of that fit my audience, right? Again, have you looked at a variety of sources before determining this is the one you will use? Sometimes I have students who just keep going back to the same well to draw water from, right? They might use the same site or the same author multiple times, and you have to watch out for that, because if all you do is cite from one person, your reader may say, well, how much research have they done, right? They've got this one person, but maybe this person is a wacko, maybe they're out of date, right? So you need to look for more sources to try to find the one that's going to be most relevant and also show that you've done really good research, right? And then thinking about relevance, would you be comfortable using it in your research paper? Is it going to really reflect what you need it to reflect about you and about the seriousness of your subject, and about the context that you're writing in, like it's an academic setting, right? That's another thing that makes it relevant. Authority, who's responsible for putting that out? It might be the author, it might be the publisher of the website, or the publisher of a book or magazine. Now, usually magazines and newspapers self-publish, right? So the New York Times is its own publisher. But books have publishers, and some of those publishers are not from reputable companies, right? So you can't assume that just because something has been put out in print, that company that did it is actually legitimate, right? And definitely we need to look at who is putting this information up on the website, if it's a website. You also need to find out what are the author's credentials or the organization's affiliations, right? What are their credentials in being able to talk about this, right? Just because, again, somebody has got a good looking site up about leadership or about whatever you're talking about, that doesn't mean that they actually have any credibility to talk. And again, it's not that they wouldn't have things that are valuable or true, but when writing an academic paper, you have to find the sources that actually have credentials that prove they have some kind of merit, some kind of knowledge that's been formally tested or verified, right? And that's why you have to look at credentials, right? And so again, and it's not just that they have like an advanced degree or something. What is that degree in? I remember my sister had this book about back exercises, and at the bottom of the front cover it said the author's name and it had PhD after her name. And my sister had been using this book for years, and so one day I kind of pick it up and I'm reading the author's bio, and I expect, because it's a book about back exercises to strengthen your back, that the author's PhD would be in kinesiology, physical therapy, something like that. Nope, she had a PhD in literature. Yeah, right. So all of a sudden I'm like, okay, what and nothing else was listed there to show that she had any credentials in telling people how to strengthen their back, right? That's a problem. So it's not just they have a credential, is that credential relevant to what you're talking about, right? Do you find any contact information on the site? If you can't track down who is responsible for this, if you can't find information about the person's credentials, you shouldn't use that site. If what they're saying is true, if it's factual, if it's helpful, then you should be able to find another source that tells you the same thing, that you can actually show their credentials. What does the URL reveal about the source or the author? And so this is, again, like, understand that the different endings for web addresses have different meanings. Like an edu or a gov, they just don't give those out because you fork over money, right? So there's a little bit more of a line. I mean, anybody can get a .com, anybody can, I think, can get a .net, But again, if it's a nonprofit organization, you probably have to file paperwork, right, other than just your name and your address. So again, realize that some things like EDU and GOV are going to be going to have a